Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. I know this is not my normal recording, but guess what? A trade in the NBA happened while I was visiting my family. So here we are breaking it down now. The Memphis Grizzlies and Houston Rockets have made a trade. And in that trade, Steven Adams is going to the Houston Rockets. And we've talked about the Rockets a lot on the channel, especially as a team hunting for a backup big man. They signed Jock Landale in the offseason. That has just simply not worked out. He has a non-guaranteed contract moving forward and likely will not be with the Houston Rockets past this season. So now you're looking at an $8 million expiring contract that they could theoretically use out in the market. But what did the Grizzlies get back in this deal? They got back Victor Oladipo, who's an expiring contract himself. And in addition to that, they got 3 second-round picks from the Houston Rockets for Steven Adams' services, who, yes, he's out this season with a season-ending surgery, but the Rockets are envisioning him as a player who could be the perfect backup big man next to Alperen Sengun, behind Alperen Sengun moving forward, as Sengun has ascended into superstardom in the NBA. Maybe superstar is a little bit of a rich word for him, but he's a true star big man. And I think there's still a lot more for him to kind of unlock in his game. He's super talented. The Rockets have just been simply looking for a backup big man who's going to be able to complement that. And really the things that Steven Adams does super well are some of the things that they need from him to kind of complement Alperen Sengun and maybe even elevate that defense even more. They've really transformed the way that their defense looks under Ime Udoka, who's been an excellent head coaching hire for this team and this organization. Like I said all offseason long, as soon as they hired him, I said that's a perfect hire and the exact type of coach that they needed. Now, Steven Adams, I think, is going to be a really great addition because he is one of the best box-out bigs in the NBA, something that honestly doesn't get as much love. Steven Adams is one of the best, honestly, in the entire association when it comes to defensive rebounding, and he really helps his team rebound. It's a huge part of what Memphis's identity had been, and when he missed the playoff series last postseason against the Los Angeles Lakers, it drastically changed the way that their team performed, especially since they also did not have Brandon Clark in that series. And the Lakers were able to maximize their size and take advantage of some of the Grizzlies' issues off of that. So to me, it's kind of surprising that the Grizzlies are dealing him because I thought, hey, Steven Adams is a key part of their organization and their team structure. But now he's been moved for 3 second-round picks and an expiring contract in Victor Oladipo, who likely does not really fill any type of long-term role with the Grizzlies or maybe even ever again in the NBA. So for the Rockets, I really love this trade. I think his ability to box guys out is going to help Houston close out more defensive possessions. I also think with his monstrous offensive rebounding numbers, he's going to be able to hit the glass hard. He's super strong, one of the strongest NBA players in the league. Now, there's a lot of speculation about this for the Memphis Grizzlies. We're going to get to them in a second. But I think really headlining this deal is the Houston Rockets making a very good long-term smart decision here. Steven Adams is currently 30 years old. He will turn 31 this offseason in the summer. So even though he feels like he's been in the league for 15 years at this point, he's actually still relatively young for his position, and the way that he plays his game predicated on strength, not athleticism, is probably going to age relatively well in the league. And just making $12.6 million next year, I think he's going to be a really great addition for the Rockets. Yes, he doesn't help them this year. It doesn't really move their title odds or their playoff odds this season at all. But I'm 100% A-okay with that because I think, again, looking at the age of their core, this is a perfect buy move where they didn't have to sacrifice any of their young talent. They didn't have to sacrifice any of the Brooklyn picks. They didn't have to sacrifice any of their own other draft pick flexibility going forward. Just 3 second-round picks. You get a player who is honestly a starting caliber level big man in your organization, and you get him for very, very cheap, in my opinion. I love this deal for them. Now let's talk about the Memphis Grizzlies. The Grizzlies are a little bit trickier for a couple of different reasons. One, this season's a lost year for them, and Steven Adams being out doesn't really change that their current outlook this year is not very good. They're a team that is probably focused on the draft this season. Maybe they can end up with a guy like Zachary Risa-Sher, which would be very interesting in the draft, someone who's a really high-level three-point shooter with good length and size on the perimeter for a wing-type player. But there's also the other perspective of maybe the Grizzlies look at themselves and say, we have this pick this year. This is kind of a luck of the draw year for them from a trade standpoint. Now, it's obviously unfortunate that Morant's missed so much time, Baines missed a good amount of time here, and Adams and Clark both missed so much time this season that their year was completely derailed. So it's a tough season, but at the same time, they're now in a spot where they might get a top 4 or 5 pick that otherwise they never would have had access to this type of trade flexibility and this type of trade asset. And now they do. So I think that's what this whole deal is about for Memphis. They get 3 more second-round picks for Adams, and they're opening up a little bit of financial space going into next season. I don't really look at it as a cap move for them. I don't see the Grizzlies going out into free agency and using this $12.6 million because Desmond Bane's on a rookie max extension. John Morant's on a rookie max extension. Jaren Jackson Jr. is making a ton of money as well. So with those 3 guys on the books, you also have Marcus Smart's contract. It's not very likely that the Grizzlies are actually going to ever operate with cap space when they have their big 3 and Smart and just Brandon Clark on a very good team-friendly deal as well. What I think is more likely is they're looking at kind of their tax line and they're looking at, hey, what player could we slot into our roster right now that will make us a heck of a lot better long-term? And the player that I think that they're super interested in is Mikal Bridges of the Brooklyn Nets. And if you think about it this way, what do the Grizzlies have to offer? They have their unprotected first-round pick this year that they could send out in a deal. That selection could be very valuable to a team like the Brooklyn Nets, who maybe if they trade Bridges, all of a sudden they're looking at a kind of a rebuild, retooling around some of their other pieces on their roster. They still have Cam Johnson. They would potentially have Nick Claxton. We'll see what happens with him. He's a trade candidate this year as well, given his contract status. They also have, Cam Thomas. So they've got some young pieces and some players that I do still like going forward for them outside of Bridges. And while the Nets are kind of in mediocrity right now, getting a Grizzlies top pick this year might actually move the needle for them long term. I know people will label this as a weak draft. I think there are a bunch of players in this draft that are going to be impact winning players going forward that I would love to see on the Brooklyn Nets. And I think that given their circumstances, a Nets and Grizzlies trade makes the most sense to me right now, because my bet on what the Grizzlies are looking at, Brandon Clark, they are viewing probably as a starting caliber center. Their lineup going forward is going to be centered something around John Morant, Desmond Bane at the guard spots, Jaren Jackson Jr. as the power forward, and the center will probably be Brandon Clark going into next season. So what's the real positional weakness there? Small forward. They let Dylan Brooks walk in free agency. They have not gotten that same level of production there. They also still have Marcus Smart. Maybe they could slot him into the starting lineup. But my viewpoint here is they saved a little bit of money against the tax next year. They've given themselves some more room to work with between where they're currently slated to be and the actual luxury tax itself. So with that being the case, a Mikal Bridges level contract, something anywhere from $13 to $18, $20 million is very doable into their cap table with how they're currently slated. So I think the Grizzlies are going to be a pivotal team to watch, making a big time buy move. They already really offered a ton when they brought in Marcus Smart, gave up 2 first-round picks to get that done, but they still have a lot to work with. They didn't really hurt their trade flexibility. They could offer up to 4 unprotected first-round picks in any deal this trade deadline for someone who they don't view helping them this year, but helping them go forward long-term as a perfect fit next to Morant, Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr. And I think if you're looking at the entire landscape of the league, the players right at the top of that totem pole would maybe be Lauri Markkanen, Mikal Bridges, and I think that's what the Grizzlies are lining up for here. And I think it's actually a relatively smart idea. It's perplexing to me because Steven Adams is such a key part of what they do. He's a really good player when he's healthy and on the floor, and obviously this season was a tough setback for him. But I think that there's long-term planning here from the Memphis Grizzlies. I think they're a very smart, well-ran team. Zach Kleiman does a great job building out that roster and kind of putting pieces together that work and fit together extremely well. They've been a great team under his control, and I think that's going to be the truth going forward as well. After this disastrous season is done, I think the Grizzlies are going to be very well positioned on the back end coming out of next offseason. And I think just given the fact that they're going to have a runway to potentially acquire a player like Mikal Bridges or a Lauri Markkanen, I think Bridges is the more likely option. We'll have to keep our eyes on exactly how that plays out. My instant trade grades, I'm going to give the Houston Rockets an A+. They got a very good player, a starting caliber center, to be their backup big. He's going to play 20 to 25 minutes a night, depending on how their games are going. If Alperen Sengun gets into foul trouble or he's not having his best defensive night, we'll probably see maybe 25 minutes from Adams. But on the nights that Sengun's playing very well, we'll probably see 15 to 20, which is perfect. You can keep Adams fresh and healthy throughout the course of a season. You don't have to tax him too much, and then come playoff time, he would be a nice contributor for him. He's played a ton of playoff games, and I think he'd be a nice veteran for the Houston Rockets. I think he's going to teach Alperen Sengun a lot of things. I just love this trade for Houston. For Memphis, I think the most fair trade grade is a TBD. This is a to be determined. What are they planning? What are they going to do? For me, I view it as a lining up to make something big happen. And Mikal Bridges is the player that I just can't shake out of my mind as my initial reaction to this trade. But that's my kind of takeaway here. I think that the Grizzlies, like value-wise, I don't love this for them. I'd probably give them like a C. But I think there's something bigger coming. So because of that, I'm going to give them a to be determined. And if they end up getting someone like Mikal Bridges, depending on how much they have to give up to do so, this might end up being an A trade grade for them because they're lined up where they might have an elite starting five with maybe Marcus Smart coming off the bench. And you're just looking at a team that, how do we guard them? How do we stop them with all of these players who can play off the catch, play off the perimeter when John Morant is just blowing by everybody like he always seems to do when he's on the floor? So Memphis is lined up for something big here. I'm excited to see how it plays out. Thanks everyone so much for watching. We'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.